Well, thank you very much. It's so good to be with all of you. It struck me that if that grandfather's song starts right in the middle, I'll know that that's the signal to leave. You know, holidays, and for me, of course, it's Christmas, are times in which I think our memories come back. And most especially, we have the opportunity just to think about how our lives are interwoven with one another. And sometimes the person who has the deepest effect on us, who we remember, is not always the one we thought we would. And sometimes it's someone who lives right at our doorstep. So I want to tell you a little story. It has to do with Christmas of 1953. I was 2 years old. Excuse me, I was in second grade. I knew you wouldn't believe if I said I was 2 years old. I was in second grade, and I searched and searched for a photograph because I know I have a photograph of this event. It was a basketball that was given to me and my brother George. And the reason I remember it especially is there's a photograph of us practically underneath the Christmas tree, and each of us has a hand on that ball. It was given by our older sister, Rose. And I think back to that basketball. Now, you must understand, my brother George was 5 years older than I, and Georgie was born with Down syndrome. So when we were growing up, by third grade, the little school I went to closed, and I went to another school. My brother Georgie, he was not able to get into another school. This was the 50s, and in the little coal town I came from in northeastern Pennsylvania, we didn't have any programs of special education. So I can remember when I went into the new school and Georgie stayed home, that each day myself and my buddies would come home and we would attempt to teach Georgie what we learned. So he learned the times tables and he learned all the things that we learned, but most especially we connected on sports. We played baseball, we played football up at the corner, but especially we played basketball. And even after I went into the seminary to go and study to become a priest, each time when I would get home, I can remember saying to Georgie, "George, you want to go and play some ball?" And he would get the basketball, and off we'd go to the 6th Street playground and play ball. And that continued pretty much all through our lives in the 60s and 70s and 80s. In 1989, our mother died. My dad had died 12 years before that. And so I actually became legal guardian for my brother George. And for 12 years, he and I lived together. We lived at first in a rectory. Now you have to understand, priests live in rectories, and I don't want to say that priests are old bachelors, but we get set in our ways. And when September of 1989, Georgie moved into that rectory, there were 2 other priests and myself living there. He changed a rectory into a home. He called each by nicknames. At the next time I'm invited back, I'll tell you what his nickname for me was. And he created a sense with all the volunteers and staff that our rectory became a home. And guess what? Right across the street from the rectory, in back of the old school, was a basketball court. And so once again, we renewed our efforts in playing basketball. I can remember that first Christmas of 1989. Our mother had just died, and so I must have looked a little down to Georgie, because I can remember he came over, he put his arm around me, and he said, "Don't worry, Mom is in heaven, you have me." And it was one of the most beautiful things. You know, we talk about giving, and love is truly not just giving, it's receiving. And I think that lesson comes back to me, the basketball and his arm around my shoulder. Let's fast forward a little bit to 2002. Because we moved, I was appointed the bishop of the Catholic Diocese in Knoxville in East Tennessee. And so we moved there together. And his last year before he died in January of 2002, he had elements of what we now call Alzheimer's disease. It was something that, thank God, didn't change his personality at all, but it slowed him down. And his last year, he had to live in a nursing facility. And I remember January of 2002, going into his hospital room. He was all fixed up with, I guess, things to monitor his heart and give him oxygen. And I don't know why I did this, but I said to Georgie, pretending I had a basketball, "Georgie, catch." And like this, from the hospital bed, he opened his hands as if to catch the ball. And I said, "George, are you ready?" And he said to me, "Are you ready?" That was the last event in the life of my brother George. And I think of the blessings that can come from unexpected places. You know, holidays, for me, Christmas, is a wonderful time for me to remember. It's a time to connect with those people who have most had an effect in my life. For isn't it true that our lives are intertwined? And that basketball, thank you, Sister Rose, for giving us that basketball, because that memory comes back even though it's, 64 years ago, and I was under the Christmas tree, and so was my brother George. And the basketball was a gift, but it was actually the channel of a deeper gift, because our lives are intertwined. And giving and receiving, that's part of love. Thanks.